Let's get one thing clear. Avoidants don't come back with flowers and apologies. They don't knock on your door in the rain. They don't send long texts confessing their love. No, they move in silence. But silence doesn't mean peace, and distance doesn't mean detachment. So how do you know they're missing you? How do you know that the one who once pushed you away is now sitting in the quiet, thinking about you more than they want to admit? Let me tell you the truth, because when someone who runs from intimacy begins to miss you, it's never loud. But the signs, they scream. Sign one, they won't say, I miss you. They won't show up at your door holding flowers. They won't call you crying in the middle of the night, pouring their heart out. That's not how they operate. That's not their language. When someone with avoidant tendencies begins to miss you, it doesn't come out in words, it leaks out in behavior. It leaks out in patterns. And the people who don't understand this mistake the silence for closure. But silence, for the avoidant, that silence is noise. It's chaos inside. It's everything they're feeling, but too afraid to say. See, this is the mistake so many people make after a breakup with an avoidant partner. You think no contact means they've moved on, that you think their lack of communication is a lack of care. But avoidance isn't the absence of emotion. It's the inability to process it. That silence isn't peace. That distance, it's pressure. Pressure they don't know how to release. Emotions they're stuffing down so deep they start showing up in indirect, bizarre ways. And if you're not paying attention, you'll miss every single one of them. When an avoidant misses you, they don't pick up the phone. They pick up their coping mechanisms. They stalk your social media. They watch your stories without reacting. They scroll through old photos and revisit the places you once went. But they do it all in the shadows. Not because they don't care. Because they care too damn much and have no clue how to handle it. Their missing you isn't a soft, romantic ache. It's a war zone inside them. It's fear. It's vulnerability. And the one thing an avoidant fears more than losing you is confronting that vulnerability head on. So what do? They signal. They leave crumbs. They test the waters. Maybe it's a like on a random post you made weeks ago. Maybe it's a mutual friend telling you they've been asking about you. Maybe it's a weird out of nowhere text that says, hey, remember that movie we watched that one time? And here's the truth. That's not casual. That's calculated. That's their version of screaming into the void. They want connection, but they can't tolerate the discomfort that comes with directly asking for it. And let's be brutally honest. If you're not grounded, that if you're still emotionally entangled in their chaos, you'll take those crumbs and build a whole damn meal. That you'll see that story view and convince yourself they're coming back. You'll hear that they mentioned your name and start waiting by the phone. And you know what happens? You get pulled back into the cycle. You chase. You reach out. You try to make it easier for them. You try to decode the signals they're too afraid to clarify. And every time you do that, you teach them that their avoidance works. That silence gets them love. That detachment gets them attention. Mm-hmm. But the truth is, their silence should not be your invitation to dance. Their absence should not make you question your worth, because here's the core of it. Avoidants don't withdraw because you were too much. They withdraw because your love confronted something in them they didn't want to face. Maybe it was their childhood wounds. Maybe it was the fear of being seen. Maybe it was the shame they've never healed. But whatever it was, your presence triggered it. That, and instead of healing through it, they ran. So when they miss you, it's not clean. It's not healing. It's messy. It's distorted. It's filled with regret they don't know how to name and longing they refuse to express. But just because they don't say it doesn't mean it isn't there. You just have to learn how to read between the lines. You have to understand that silence has context. That silence can be full of emotion. that the people who push you away the hardest are often the ones who miss you the most when you're gone. But don't mistake their silence for strength. Don't convince yourself they're fine just because they're quiet. That quiet is screaming with everything they're too emotionally paralyzed to process. And you need to understand this. Their silence isn't your responsibility to fix. You are not the translator of someone else's emotional immaturity. You are not the rescuer of someone who refuses to grow. Your job is to listen to the silence and still choose yourself. You can feel their energy all day long. You can sense the pull, the thoughts, the quiet grief behind their behavior. But if they don't have the courage to come forward, if they don't have the emotional tools to communicate, that then they don't get access to you. Because emotional availability isn't about watching stories or liking posts or sending vague texts. It's about showing up fully, honestly, directly. And if they're not doing that, then they're not ready for you. And here's the hardest truth of all. You don't chase clarity from someone who only offers confusion. You don't beg for closure from someone who ran from connection. You don't keep the door cracked open for someone who knocked it off its hinges and called it love. Let them sit in their silence. Let them feel the absence they created. Let them miss you like crazy, and let them do it alone. Because the moment you start translating breadcrumbs as love, you start betraying yourself. You deserve real. You deserve presence. You deserve someone who doesn't make you read between the lines just to feel loved. And the person who truly misses you, they won't make you guess. They won't make you decode. They'll show up. They'll speak. They'll do the hard thing and be vulnerable. And until that day comes, the only response you owe silence is your own. That's power. That's growth. That's how you break the cycle. Sign 2. They never really say it, do they? They don't send the long message at 2 a.m. confessing that they miss you. They don't stand outside your window with signs and music. No, that's not their style. What they do is more subtle, more passive, and more manipulative than most people want to admit. They breadcrumb you. They throw tiny little pieces of attention your way and sit back to see if you'll chase. It's not confusion. It's not a mistake. It's calculated hope on their terms. They're hoping you'll take the bait. And if you're not careful, you will. Let's stop pretending breadcrumbing is harmless. It's not a little like or an innocent text. It's emotional manipulation. It's someone who knows exactly what they're doing, offering you just enough to keep you close, never enough to actually meet your needs. This is what people don't get. When someone sends you a stranger or reacts to your Instagram story after ghosting you for weeks, that's not an accident. That's not them just checking in. That's them trying to keep the emotional door cracked open without ever fully walking through it. Why do they do it? Because it works. Because they know that once you've felt that connection, once you've opened yourself up to them, once they've occupied space in your heart, your brain is wired to hold on. You start hoping. You start searching for signs. You convince yourself that maybe, just maybe, this time it's different. And so when they breadcrumb you, when they toss that digital compliment or bring up an old memory or send you a song you once shared, it reignites your emotional investment. It reactivates that attachment. It pulls you back in. And here's the kicker. They don't even have to offer commitment. They don't have to show up for you. They don't have to change. They just have to give you a hit of connection, and boom, you're spiraling again. You're analyzing every word, every emoji, every silence between messages. It's a cycle of addiction. You get just enough dopamine to feel something, but never enough to feel secure. That's what breadcrumbing is. It's hope engineered to keep you stuck. Now, let's get real about what's really happening here. That breadcrumb. It's not love. That I saw your post and thought of you isn't affection. It's control. That It's someone testing whether they still have emotional power over you, that it's someone who's not willing to choose you, but isn't ready to let you go. And you deserve better than that. You deserve someone who shows up with both feet in, not someone who tosses crumbs to see if you'll come running. Because let me ask you this, that how many times have you responded? How many times have you gotten your hopes up only to feel that familiar crash of disappointment again? How many times have you reread that message, convinced it meant more than it did? You start negotiating your standards. You start making excuses for their behavior. Well, maybe they're just scared of getting hurt. Maybe they just need more time. No, that they're not confused. They're comfortable. Comfortable knowing that you're still emotionally available even when they aren't willing to offer anything real in return. And the moment you take that bait, the moment you respond, you've taught them that breadcrumbs are enough. That their silence, followed by sudden attention, still gets a reaction, still keeps you around, still holds space in your life. And that's the real tragedy. You become complicit in your own emotional starvation. You keep hoping that one day those crumbs will turn into a feast, that one day they'll wake up, realize your worth, and finally choose you fully. But they won't, because they don't have to, because you're still there, waiting, checking, hoping. So what do? Instead, you recognize it, you name it, you take your power back, because the second you stop reacting, the game ends. The minute you stop responding to vague messages, the second you stop interpreting breadcrumbs as signs of love, everything shifts. You become unavailable to emotional manipulation. You become immune to their passive attempts to pull you back in. And let me tell you, nothing terrifies someone who breadcrumbs more than silence. Your silence says, I know my worth. Your silence says, this is no longer enough. Your silence says, if you want me, you show up fully or not at all, because you're not a halfway person. You're not someone to be kept on the bench while they figure things out. You are not a second thought, a backup plan, or an emotional pit stop. You are not here to soothe their guilt or validate their ego. You are here to be chosen fully. And until someone is ready to do that, they don't get access to you. Not even a text, not even a reply. Not even a second of your energy. And yes, it's going to hurt. Of course it will. You're human. You care? You hoped. But every time you resist the urge to respond, every time you hold your boundary instead of breaking it, you get stronger. You get clearer. You start to build a version of yourself that doesn't settle for crumbs because you know you deserve the whole damn meal. Let them breadcrumb someone else. Let them play small with people who haven't done the work, but not with you. You've healed too much. You've cried too many tears. You've worked too hard to go back to emotional minimums. You're done confusing breadcrumbs for love. You're done translating mixed signals. You're done shrinking yourself just to feel wanted. The right person will not keep you guessing. The right person won't rely on games or subtle signs. They will show up. They will make it known that they won't need to breadcrumb because they'll be standing right in front of you, holding the whole damn loaf. And until that person shows up, you keep walking, you keep healing, you keep rising, because anything less than real isn't worth your energy anymore. Sign 3, let's talk about something that hits harder than most people will admit, that the avoidant didn't seem to care while you were hurting. They didn't chase you when you pulled away. They didn't fight for you when you started to fall apart. You sat in the aftermath of the breakup, carrying all the emotional weight, and they looked like they were fine. Cold, detached, unbothered. You thought they didn't feel a thing. But here's the truth that no one tells you. What they really feared wasn't losing you. It was watching you move on without them. That because here's what happens. The avoidant exits the relationship first, mentally, emotionally, physically. they convince themselves it's the right decision. They say they need space, that they don't feel the same anymore. And you, the one who was emotionally present, are left devastated. You're left to pick up the broken pieces. You grieve. You cry. You try to understand what went wrong. You go through hell trying to get clarity, but they just vanish. They pull away. They go silent. And you start to believe that maybe you never really mattered to them at all. But don't let that silence fool you. Avoidants are experts at suppressing emotion. They don't process things the same way you do while you're feeling it all immediately. Raw, intense, overwhelming, they bury it. They push it down. They avoid it. That's what they've always done. So in the beginning, they really do seem like they're okay. They're out with friends. They look fine online. They're laughing. They're posting. They're acting like nothing happened. But underneath that cool, calm surface, a storm is brewing. And it doesn't hit them right away. It hits them when they see something that reminds them of what they lost. It hits them when they finally realize you're not waiting anymore. It hits them the moment you stop checking their page, the moment you stop reacting, the moment you post that photo where you're smiling again, not pretending, but really smiling. It hits them when they see that glow in your face that says, I've moved on. That's when the panic starts. That's when they realize you were never the problem. That's when the weight of what they walked away from smashes into them full force. Because as long as you were broken, as long as you were hurting, they still felt like they had control. But once you start rising, once you stop giving them emotional access, that's when they realize just how much you meant. This is the part that hurts for them. The realization that they can't just waltz back in, that the door isn't cracked open anymore, because now the person they pushed away has grown. You've changed. You've evolved. You've reclaimed your power. And the version of you that would have bent to keep them comfortable no longer exists. You're not standing in the wreckage waiting for closure. You became the closure. You stopped begging. You stopped chasing. You stopped hoping for them to figure it out. And you chose yourself. Let's be honest, that terrifies them. Because here's the thing. Avoidants don't hate connection. They crave it. But it scares the hell out of them. So when they had someone who offered deep love, honesty, consistency, and vulnerability, it triggered every defense mechanism they had. That's not on you. That's on their unhealed wounds. But the biggest fear for them isn't being alone. It's realizing they were loved deeply and still ran. It's waking up one day and realizing they had something real and lost it because they didn't know how to handle it. So when they see you moving on, it's not just about missing your face or the memories. It's about facing themselves. It's about having to admit that they lost someone they actually needed. And the worst part, now they can't reach you the way they used to. That hook they had in your heart, it's gone. That version of you that waited for breadcrumbs doesn't live here anymore. That's why they retreat even deeper. That's why they pull away harder after seeing you thrive. Because it hurts. Because your growth is a mirror to their regret. But let me tell you something powerful. You didn't lose them. They lost you. You showed up. You gave love they weren't ready to receive. You offered something that scared them, not because it was wrong, but because it was real. And instead of rising to meet you, they ran. That's not your fault. That's their fear. That's their story to unpack, not yours to fix. So if you've been wondering why they disappeared after you started to glow again, that if you've been questioning why they're suddenly colder now that you're rising, it's because they're not okay. It's because your healing exposes their avoidance. Your light highlights their darkness. Your peace reminds them that they never knew how to hold someone who was ready for real love. And listen, that I know it's tempting to go back when they come around again, when they suddenly miss you. When they start liking your posts, that when they reach out with casual texts that feel like attempts to reconnect. But remember this, they're not missing you because they're ready to love you right.
Mm-hmm.
They're missing you because they see they can't control you anymore. They're missing their access to you, not the version of you that's strong, stable, and healed. That version scares them. They miss the old you, the one that would have taken them back in a heartbeat. Don't go back. Don't dim your light to make someone else feel comfortable in their shadows. That don't shrink to fit into the emotional box they tried to keep you in. You've come too far. You've risen too high. That you've learned too much about your worth to settle for someone who only realizes what they had after it's gone. Let them sit in that realization. Let them feel the consequences of their avoidance. Let your growth be the lesson they never expected to learn, because nothing hits harder than watching the person you pushed away build a life you no longer get to be part of. And you keep going. You keep shining. You keep healing, because the love you were giving them, that love belongs to you now. And that's a beautiful thing. Sign 4, just because someone regrets losing you doesn't mean they're right for you. That just because someone starts to miss you doesn't mean you should turn around and go back. That you've got to stop making other people's emotional wake up calls your responsibility to fix. Their missing you is not your cue to return. Their silence turning into digital breadcrumbs is not a sign from the universe. That their regret is not your green light to undo all the healing you've done. If they had the chance to love you right and they didn't take it, why are you treating their regret like a redemption arc? That, let's get brutally honest, they didn't choose you when it mattered. They didn't show up when you needed them. They weren't consistent. That they weren't emotionally safe. Mm-hmm. And instead of working through their fears, they ran. They distanced themselves. They acted like you were the problem. They made you feel like your need for connection, reassurance, and depth was too much. So when they start missing you, when they realize they lost someone who actually cared, that feeling of regret is theirs to carry. Pain, that longing, that what if they now live with every day. That's not your load to pick up. You can't keep going back to people who made you question your worth just because they finally realized yours. That's not growth, that's repetition. And you don't need another round of emotional starvation. You don't need to teach the same lesson twice. When someone shows you they're not emotionally capable of holding space for the kind of love you offer, believe them. Believe their actions. Believe the chaos they left behind. Because your memory may be attached to the highlights, but your nervous system remembers the confusion, the emotional roller coaster, the breadcrumbing, the longing, the silence. That is what they gave you. And now they miss you. That doesn't mean they're ready. That doesn't mean they've changed. That doesn't mean they suddenly learned how to love that. It just means they've finally noticed the void, the absence of your presence, the peace that used to come from your energy. And now that it's gone, now that you're no longer emotionally accessible, now they want to circle back. But you have to ask yourself that, are they drawn to you, or are they drawn to the feeling of being safe again without doing the work to earn it? Here's the hard truth, that most people don't miss you. They miss how you made them feel. They miss your light, your consistency, your availability. But loving someone isn't about convenience. It's about choice. And if they couldn't choose you at your most vulnerable, if they couldn't show up when you were offering your heart, that they don't deserve a second chance just because they're uncomfortable with the consequences of their own emotional avoidance. So when they start showing signs that they miss you, don't confuse that with transformation. Missing you isn't growth. Missing you isn't change. It's just pain. And pain on its own doesn't create change. Pain without responsibility becomes a cycle. And you've already been through that cycle once, you don't need to do it again. That you don't need to convince yourself that their regret is romantic. It's not. It's just delayed awareness. It's someone waking up too late to the value of what they had. And that timing, that's not your fault. That's on them. That you have to stop rescuing people from their own consequences. You have to stop letting "I miss you" be enough to open the door, because the version of you who once would have answered that knock, that version doesn't exist anymore. You've grown. You've stretched, that you've bled. You've cried in silence. You've rebuilt yourself brick by brick while they were off pretending nothing mattered. And now that you've risen, now that you've found your footing again, they want to come back. You have to look at that for what it is, an invitation to return to a past you outgrew. You are not obligated to return just because they finally feel your absence. Your healing journey is not theirs to interrupt. That you don't owe them access. You don't owe them another chance to get it right. That's not how growth works. That growth means looking back at the people who hurt you and choosing not to let them back in, not because you hate them, not because you're bitter, but because you love yourself too much to gamble with your peace again. And yes, it's going to be tempting when you get that message, when they start reaching out, when they start reminding you of the good times. You'll want to believe it, that you'll want to give them the benefit of the doubt. But here's where you take control. You remember what it cost you the first time. You remember how many nights you laid awake wondering if you were enough. You remember the tears, the questions, the emotional silence. You remember the version of you that begged to be seen. And you remember how long it took to rebuild that broken confidence. That their regret is not your emergency. Their missing you is not your responsibility to soothe. If they really valued you, that you wouldn't be hearing about it now, you would have felt it then. And the truth is, if they couldn't choose you in your presence, they don't deserve to access you in your absence. Let them miss you. Let them sit in the pain they created. Let them wish they had done things differently. That's not cruelty. That's consequences. And you keep walking forward. You keep rising. You keep investing in the version of yourself that doesn't settle for emotional scraps, because the real flex, the real glow up, it's choosing yourself after they realize they lost you. It's knowing you don't need their validation to feel worthy anymore. It's having the strength to hear, "I miss you," and still say, "That's not enough." Because the only love that deserves your energy now is the kind that shows up when it matters, not just when it's convenient. A sign 5, they didn't leave because you were too much. They left because they were too limited. That's what you need to hear right now without any sugarcoating. You keep replaying the moments in your head, wondering if you said too much, loved too deeply, that showed up too consistently. You're stuck in the loop of questioning yourself. Was I too emotional, too vulnerable, too available? No. You were simply more than they were ready to receive. And instead of rising to meet you, they ran. That this is what happens when someone emotionally unavailable comes face to face with real love. They collapse, they panic, they push it away. Because when you're used to superficial connections, when you're used to shallow conversations and surface level attention, someone who brings depth, honesty, and presence becomes overwhelming. It forces them to feel. And avoidants don't want to feel. Feeling is messy. Feeling is unfamiliar. Feeling means they might lose control. And for someone who's spent their life keeping their walls high, that your love felt threatening, not because it was wrong, but because it was real. But you keep blaming yourself. You keep thinking, maybe if I had pulled back, maybe if I'd been more chill, maybe if I'd played harder to get. Stop. Right there. That you don't need to shrink yourself to keep someone close. You don't need to dim your intensity just to be tolerated. You don't have to tone down your truth for someone who's scared of facing their own. You were not too much. You were exactly right for someone who's capable of receiving that kind of energy. The problem isn't you. The problem is that you handed your heart to someone who hadn't even figured out how to handle their own. That you gave depth to someone drowning in their fear of vulnerability. You brought clarity to someone who's only ever functioned in chaos. And guess what? That scared them because you were the mirror. Your love reflected everything they had yet to heal. And that kind of reflection, it's uncomfortable. It's confronting. So they left, not because of your worth, but because of their wounds. Do not let their inability to stay make you question the value of your love. Not everyone is equipped to handle consistency. Not everyone knows how to navigate